And good. I see the attendees rolling in, so it won't just be us.
Yeah, we probably need to wait for a couple minutes for all the attendees to join. Okay, so I think we should get it started since we have some attendees joined to the conference. So hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. This is a session on careers in GIS panel discussion. My name is Mohsen Ahmedkhani. I'm a PhD student in geography at the University of Minnesota. So I will be serving as the moderator of this session. We will be having a group of incredible people, well experienced in GIS industry. So this will give us a great opportunity to, through our questions and clarify all the ambiguities in our career. I'm going to introduce Andrew Lammers and then pass it over to Andrew, and he will give an opportunity to everyone in the panel to introduce themselves. Andrew Lammers is a GIS professional and GIS administrator at Short Elliott Hendrickson Incorporated. He has experience of working in both public and private sectors, and he has been on the boards of directors for 2 nonprofit organizations. And he also has the experience of serving as the GEO mentor for MNGIS Alliance Conference. And this is a 1 hour long webinar, so you are welcome to ask your questions whenever you had into Q&A box or in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and speak. The panelists are gracious enough; they will answer all the questions whenever they are popping up. So, Andrew, stage is yours. So,
Hey, thanks so much. I actually need to update that bio a little bit. It's recently started a new position, so now I gotta go through and update all those pieces again.
okay.
I'm gonna go ahead here and share my screen. I'm gonna be jumping back and forth between. Excuse me. I'm going to be jumping back and forth a little bit between the PowerPoint slide and then turning it off so that you get to look at our cameras and all of our pretty faces. So this is the Careers in GIS panel discussion. And I really want to drive home the point that this is a discussion. So I really want this to feel like a conversation, not a rigid presentation where, we have a formal thing we want to get across here. This is more of we just want to talk about our background, both in education and professional experience. And then hopefully somebody's listening that either has a question about, maybe how should they, route their career, or as they're applying for jobs, what do those resumes look like? So I'm hopeful that our panel discussion here will give a little bit of a background on who we are, and then we'll open it up for questions. As Mohsen said, feel free to throw things in the chat box or the Q&A box as well. So here's our agenda today. We're going to start out with introductions. I think it's important to know the background on everybody so that you know what's applicable to that person. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to ask me questions about being a PhD student, seeing as how I'm not one and probably won't be one. So want to make sure we get those introductions out there so you know who we are and why we're here. Topic number 1 is going to be education. We're going to touch on undergraduate programs, graduate programs, as well as certificates. Topic number 2 is going to be just professional experience. So how did we get to where we are, and what do we think our career path is going to look like moving forward? What does the industry look like? And then topic number 3 is really broad. I'm calling it leadership, because this is going to be the, what advice would you give to a recent graduate, to a current student? What does the hiring process look like? What do you look for in an interviewee? And then from the job seeker side, what do you look for when applying to jobs? What makes you decide one company or another? And then we have some time set aside for open Q&A at the end, but kind of mentioned it, but I want to drive home the point that if you have a question, feel free to send it in the chat box or raise your hand, I think is enabled for everybody, because I really want this to be a discussion. So with that, you already heard a little bit about who I am. And like I said, I need to update that. I'm currently a GIS analyst at Optum, and I have spent some time in school. So I did my associate's degree at Normandale Community College. I went to the U of M for my bachelor's degree, and then I did my master's program with UW-Madison. So that was an online program, not in person. So my experience in grad school is going to be a little different than other people's. And with that, I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Oz. Can't hear you if you are not on mute. I got nothing. So I will give you a chance to figure out the microphone. Hopefully it's not my headset and just can't hear. So I'll come back to you. Don't worry. We'll let Jacqueline give her a chance to talk and introduce herself.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jacqueline Kovarek. I have been in the GIS field for about 11 or 12 years. Let's see, my education background, I got my undergraduate degree in geography and environmental studies from Gustavus, and my master's in GIS from St. Mary's University. My current role is as a GIS analyst at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The sector is obviously federal government and engineering. And in my personal life outside of work, I like to spend a lot of time outdoors, hiking, fishing, kayaking, and gardening. I love to watercolor, and I have 2 kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, so I'm usually pretty busy with them.
Andrew, you're muted.
Excellent. I'm glad that we're all well aware of how technology works 1.5 years into working from home. I'll give Shona a chance here to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shona Roberts. Thanks for having me here. I hope everyone's having a great conference so far. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I graduated from the University of Minnesota, Duluth in 2018 with a BA in GIS. While I was going to UMD, I worked at the Geospatial Analysis Center, so now known as USpatial. While I was going to UMD, I did a number of internships that I can get into a little bit later. And then after I graduated in 2018, I worked for Carleton County as their GIS specialist there. And then just this, starting in September, I started a master's program at the University of Utah. So in a master's of science in geography. So I'm basing it in GIS. So I'm actually signing in from Utah right now. So yeah. And then I guess my outside of GIS, I mean, I like to spend a lot of time outside. I like to cook. I really like to ski, hence being in Utah. And I like to scuba dive. So yeah, so I'm excited to be here.
Glad to have you here. Oz, I saw a thumbs up from you earlier.
Yep, hopefully you can hear me now.
Perfect.
Yep, hi everyone, my name is Oz, and I went to school at Minnesota State University, Mankato for civil engineering. And then right after graduation, I went to school same university for urban and regional planning. Currently, I work as a traffic engineer for KLJ Engineering. This is a private sector. We do a lot of government projects. And outside of work, I enjoy spending my time with my family and 2 daughters.
All right. I'm making the point of not muting myself again, just so that I don't accidentally forget that I'm muted again. Well, yeah, glad everybody can join us. I know we touched on it just a little bit here at the beginning, talking about our education and background, but I do want to dig into it a little bit deeper. So I kind of structured this in a way that I thought a career would progress. Most people don't jump right into the GIS industry right out of high school. I feel like that would be impossible. And I know things have changed, and kids are getting exposed to different things in high school now as far as professions and careers go, but I certainly didn't know what GIS was. So as we're starting out here with education, I first learned what GIS was in my associate degree program. So I was doing generals at community college and didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was an art and film major to start with, actually. And then I ended up with the geography concentration and learned what GIS was. So, maybe we'll start with Shona, since you're the least removed from your undergraduate program. How did you learn what GIS was and decide to make that your major for your undergrad?
Yeah, so I was going to UMD. I was a biology major, and I took chemistry, and I quickly changed my major because chemistry and I didn't mesh well together. And I became an environmental studies major. And while doing the environmental studies program at UMD, I think the name has changed now. Don't quote me on that, but you have to take a couple GIS classes. So from being in one of those GIS classes, I went into it having no idea what it was. But it was just a requirement for the program. And then I went into it kind of nervous and probably not thinking I was going to do very well. But I actually really, really enjoyed it, and it was really fun. And then after that one semester, I was in one GIS class, I decided to switch my major to GIS. So that's how I got to GIS. Was there another question?
No, you're good there. Jacqueline, I don't, when I think of GIS, I don't typically think of, a small private, liberal arts school. What's the GIS program like at Gustavus? And how did you get it? How did you, find yourself in the GIS program there?
Yeah, good question. My finding of the GIS world was really similar to Shauna's. Start chemistry major, and then it was for me. So I switched to environmental studies, and one of the classes that sounded interesting to me was cartography. So this is going to date me, but we started using ArcGIS 3.2 in the cartography class, and I loved it. I've always been really into data visualization and anything kind of creative. So being able to blend science and creativity with the cartography was right up my alley. And just that little introduction to GIS through cartography was key for me. There was only 2 other GIS classes at the time at Gustavus. This was in like 2005. And so I took both of those, and they were basically just intro to GIS and then advanced GIS. And I graduated with a degree in geography. They didn't have a GIS program or GIS degree at that time. But I also did an internship my senior year with Carver County and got a lot of hands-on experience there too.
Awesome. Yeah, I tend to just tell people I got a degree in GIS, but it was definitely geography as well.
Yeah.
Oz, you're a little different here. So you're the outsider, kind of straddling that line between GIS professional, but your background is in engineering. So when you're going to school to be a civil engineer, do you get much exposure to GIS, or what does that look like?
Not really, not at the I mean, when I was there, I haven't heard of GIS courses in my the degree that I got. But my first experience, or actually learning about that there is a technology called GIS, or there is something called GIS, was because of my roommate, who happened to be a grad student in GIS. So that was my first experience knowing about it. But eventually I learned about it when I had internships and I worked in the engineering sector, that GIS people work very close to engineers and planners. So at that point I knew, okay, yeah, there is some connection with it. So eventually I saw their work, and I was initially not great at writing reports. So GIS would let me do the mapping and communicate through maps rather than text. So that helped me get my interest in GIS.
I like that. That's interesting. One of my good friends in college was going to school to be a civil engineer, and he used to always bug me. He's like, "Why are you going for GIS? That just means you're going to have to work for me later." And it wasn't until he actually started working, actually similar to you at Bolton and Menck, that's when he was like, GIS is a lot bigger than I thought it was. Sorry, I said that. Now I'm actually going to skip ahead there just because Ozzy kind of touched on it there. Your first major exposure to GIS was, while working. Was there anything in particular beyond, being able to communicate with the map that really drew you to that? I mean, AutoCAD has some of the similar functionality and, drawing up plan sets. Was there something that about GIS in particular that got your attention?
Good that you brought up. As a civil engineering student, I had exposure to AutoCAD and all those kind of softwares. But once I actually saw GIS, and I thought that this is much cooler than CAD work. So that's why I said that, you know what, there are a lot of already people that are working on CAD. There aren't that many engineers who work on this. So I'm going to be among the top ones to do it. So I diverted, started GIS, and I'm very happy with it.
Definitely. Now our panel here is, I guess I think it's unique, but everybody here is either has completed their master's degree or is currently enrolled in a master's program. Hopefully that doesn't make us too biased towards grad school, but yeah, I'm actually trying to remember now. I had conversations with all the panelists ahead of time, but I'm trying to remember who went straight to grad school from their undergrad program, or did everybody get some work experience before hopping into grad school? I guess, Shauna, you're a grad student right now. Let's start with you. I know you worked a little bit though.
Yeah, so after I graduated from UMD, I got my first big GIS job working for Carleton County. And then I did that for 3 years. And then it was always my intent to go back to school. I always wanted to go to grad school. But I definitely wanted to practice my GIS skills more. So my goal I would like to teach GIS eventually. But I really wanted that real world experience, that applied knowledge, instead of just jumping straight into grad school. So after 3 years at Carleton, then I started applying to different schools, and that's when I got into the University of Utah.
Very cool. Was there something in particular that drew you to Utah's program versus, U of M or some of the ones closer to Duluth anyway?
Right. So I have family that live here too, so that was kind of a big draw to come here, and then just all the recreational opportunities as well. But as far as the university, I was really drawn to the geography department at the University of Utah. They have a lot of funding. They're a very big program, and they just have some really great professors here. So, and it's just a really great school, and they gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. So
Perfect.
yeah.
Perfect. Jacqueline, what did your entry into grad school look like? What inspired that decision?
So once I graduated from Gustavus, I had just a few GIS classes in my internship kind of under my belt, and I knew that I wanted a job in GIS. But unfortunately, I graduated in 2007, and then the 2008 recession happened right away. So there was really not a lot of opportunity for jobs in any sector, but especially for people that just had like a bachelor's degree and kind of a general one like geography or environmental studies. So I worked for a couple years actually in the mortgage industry. And I knew that eventually I was either going to try to get a job. I didn't want to go to grad school if I didn't have to, but I ended up having to go to get into the field basically. So I'm really, really glad that I did. I had a friend that was going to the program at St. Mary's University, and she loved it and encouraged me to go. And I liked it because at the Minneapolis campus, you could attend night classes. So I was still working full time, and I was able to go to school full time and graduate in 2 years. And the program was really, really hands-on, which I liked because I needed a lot more hands-on experience to feel software for applying for more jobs. I'm glad that I went, and I would definitely recommend it for people that want to expand their skill sets. But I don't think it's an essential thing to do to get into the GIS career field either.
Right. Yeah, I've got a few friends that have 2-year certificates, and they're, working as GIS professionals and successfully with that 2-year certificate. I followed a similar path as you. I was in my second GIS job working full time before I decided to go back to grad school. Now you mentioned you were working full time, but was that in a GIS position, or was that mortgage position not GIS related?
Yeah, that's a good question. I started, so I actually quit the mortgage industry because it was pretty depressing. It was like during the housing crash and everything, foreclosures. I was working in a foreclosure department. So I quit and actually applied for a position with the Conservation Corps of Minnesota, which is through AmeriCorps. And I was doing like field conservation type work, and I saw an opening at the DNR, like through the Conservation Corps. It was a Conservation Corps position at the DNR doing GIS. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. So I applied. And then at the same time, I started my graduate program. So it kind of all came together. When I was like 22 or something.
Very cool. And Oz, I know you have a master's in planning. Did that touch on to GIS a little bit more than the undergrad program did, or still, keeping your distance from a GIS level?
Well, when I did my undergrad, which was in engineering, there was no GIS. When I started master's, and I went to master's because of the same reasons as Jacqueline mentioned, jobs at that time. But I found my first job like after college within 6 months. So I was doing both masters and I work at the same time. So there was no GIS specifically in that program, but there were a lot of GIS major students, grad students that were taking some planning courses. So by then I already had exposure to it in my work. So I requested the department to add GIS and, have a class. So there wasn't that many classes at that time. So it was really funny that they did add a class called GIS for planners. And I was enrolled in that class, and I was actually teaching that class as well. So.
Oh, that's very cool. How did you get into the, since Shona mentioned she's wants to teach GIS at some point, was that just, I don't want to say just as, but was that as in a student assistant role, or how did you get to be in the position getting that teaching experience?
Well, I was a research or teaching assistant at that time, but like when that class was started, none of the professors had exposure to GIS. So they saw that I knew it. So they told me that, why don't you teach the course? So
Awesome. Looks like we have one of the questions, and it actually fits in perfectly. So our was going to talk about our undergrad programs, graduate school, and then certifications. And one of the questions that came through the chat I see is, Andrew, can you tell us more about your friends who have found success with only certificates? Yeah, so there's two in particular. So one of them, they did a 2-year program at a tech school. I want to say it was Anoka Ramsey. They had a it was either 1-year or 2-year GIS program just to get a technical certificate in it. So they were able to do that. And then they were able to find a seasonal position. So it was working with collector out in the field. So, you know, not getting deep into ArcMap and Pro, but out in the field using those applications. And it does help if you know a little bit of how those apps work from a back end, how it looks developing those. And so he was able to use that knowledge, apply it to that seasonal position, which led to him getting some good recommendations, and then was able to apply to entry-level GIS positions that were full-time, not the seasonal full-time position anymore. And with those recommendations from his seasonal position, with that little bit of experience, it was enough to get him an interview and get him a full-time job. And I know he's been promoted at least once over there. So that's how he found success with only a GIS certificate. And I don't want to say only, because I actually feel like I learned more at Normandale in my associate program than I did at the U of M in my bachelor's program. That's not a knock against the U of M. That's more of a, like, community college is legit. Yeah, I learned a lot there. My other friend who found success with just a certificate was actually changing career paths. So they had a master's degree in a fine arts program. I want to say it was a music degree, and they were capable technically, and not just, you know, being able to write music. And they were able to do the UW's online program, which was another technical certificate for GIS. And then they were able to leverage their professional background, their work experience, along with that certificate to say, here's why I belong in an office, here's what I can show for that. Kind of on that topic of certifications, you know, Oz, I'm going to come back to you. So Jacqueline and myself both have the GISP certification. You're a professional engineer. Maybe this is too big of a question to just come out of the gates with, but you know, the PE is really well respected. Well, you have to have it if you're going to have an engineering career. What can we do? How can we put the GISP certificate in line with that, so that you know, people, I don't want to say people look down on it by any means, but you know, that it has a little bit more, carries a little bit more weight with it, like the PE does.
Absolutely, it does. I mean, just like PEs, any certification is helpful. So, you know, if you have a GISP, it's great to land a job in this competitive market. And it also gives, you know, you a strong, you have the strength in, you know, being, I mean, reporting such documents and stuff. So it really helps. So credibility, for instance. But from that, I mean, yeah, just it helps you with the competitive market right now.
Yeah, Jacqueline, I don't want to date you, but did you have to take the test for your GISP?
I got in right before the exam got put in place, thankfully, because I've heard it's pretty challenging. So yeah, I was lucky enough to not have to take it, but I did want to add that in a couple jobs that I've had, it's been helpful in the employer knowing that my experience and everything that I had on my resume was legitimate. And I think in one instance, they were like, oh, we don't even really need to do like a reference check or background check because you have your GISP. So that kind of qualifies for that. But otherwise, yeah, I don't know. The GISP, I think it's great for our industry, but I can't say that it's done a ton for like applying for jobs and stuff.
I've got a similar experience as you. I had to take the test. I actually failed the first time. I'm not a good test taker. I got frustrated and kind of gave up on it. And then I got the score sheet and did the math and was like, I probably missed this by like 4 questions. Like I should have just stuck it out. But the reason I decided to get my GISP was I was working for SEH at the time, and when we're bidding on contracts, there's some of them that ask for that specifically. And I think it's worthwhile. I'm glad to see it because I think it would be great to have a little bit more acknowledgement to that certification. Now, Jacqueline, I think if memory serves right, you've also have a project management certificate.
No, it's
Sorry.
a aircrew training program manager qualification, and that's just through the Corps of Engineers for our drone program. Yeah.
Very cool. Looks like we have a couple questions coming in. How often do you have to recertify to keep your GISP? I believe it's 3 years. Somebody want to correct me if I'm wrong on that? Jacqueline's nodding, so I think we're good with 3 years. And my understanding too is if you don't have your certification lapse, you don't have to take the test again, which is a great incentive to, keep participating in these conferences and these presentations and stay up to date on that certification. And I see another question here too. Does a PhD degree make you overqualified for the GIS industry? Shona, you're talking about teaching, and I know that's something that I don't want to say requires a PhD, but is more likely that you'll have to go that route. Do you have any thoughts on seeking out a PhD?
I would really like to get my PhD. I'm going to try and get through my master's first and then
Yep.
see how it goes and see how well I do with research. I'd really like to work teaching like what you're talking about in community college. I would really love to teach GIS at the community college level, and you just need your master's for that. So or maybe even just in the private sector to teach GIS, but it's definitely on my radar. If the right offer comes around and I continue to enjoy studying at the University of Utah, I definitely will try to pursue it. But the question that came through, I don't think it makes you overqualified for the GIS industry. I think it just builds on your knowledge. And I think if you want to be like specialized in a subtopic within GIS, and you have a passion, I think it's definitely go for it and do it. And I don't think it makes you overqualified.
I agree. I think it's very specific on what you're researching, and then also what you want your career path to look like. If you want to teach at the U of M, odds are you're going to need to get that PhD. If you want to, work in the field with GPS equipment, you probably don't need a PhD for that, unless you're building the field equipment, which would be a whole other PhD program probably. Oz, I know you. I know you went to school to work on your PhD. What kind of led to that decision to advance your education beyond the master's degree?
Peer pressure, I would say. Everyone telling me, my advisors pushing me, telling me that you are made for academia, go for it. You're gonna do great. So that kind of prompted me. Okay, I'll let me apply. I know nobody's gonna accept me. On a surprise, I applied at 4 schools, 3 accepted. So I'm like, oh, okay. So went with the flow for some time. So yeah.
Oh, good deal. The only time I've gotten close to applying to a PhD program, fiance and I were briefly talking about moving to Toronto, where she has some family, and I wasn't convinced I'd be able to get a job there, and so I said that's fine, but you got to pay for me to go back to school if we move to Toronto. Obviously, we're still in the Twin Cities, so that didn't happen, but we'll see. I'm gonna move forward onto our next topic, which is, now that you've talked about your education, your background, what does it look like to be a GIS professional and to enter that workforce and, working day to day as a GIS professional? Jacqueline, I'll come back to you here. What did it look like? You mentioned finishing your undergrad in 2007 and the job market being pretty dry. What did it look like finishing grad school and trying to enter the GIS profession?
Yeah, good question. I would say by the time I finished grad school in 2011, there was a little bit better of an economy. So there were a little more job opportunities. But I noticed as soon as I had my master's degree, I was getting a lot of callbacks on applications that I submitted to different jobs. I knew that I wanted to be in kind of an environmental field. So I was working that temporary position through AmeriCorps at the DNR, and that was coming to an end. And so I applied to Westwood Professional Services, and I worked on their GIS team there for a little while until a job opened up back at the DNR. And then I went back there. So I think at that point, having my master's degree really helped me get that first job. And then what I did, my career path, I think once I got a little bit of experience under my belt and had my master's degree, I kind of looked at the job classifications that existed in the field at that time. So there was technician, specialist, analyst, developer, similar to the positions now. But I would look at what the qualifications were for those roles and then kind of where I wanted to be in 5 years. And I would try to get those skills in my current job. So I was in a GIS support role at the DNR. That was kind of my first long-term job for a few years. And I was learning a ton about the technology and troubleshooting and helping people through projects. And I was teaching some classes there as well. But I knew that I wanted to get more into programming. So I started going to programming classes on the weekends and kind of trying to fit little programming projects in here and there, and then applied for an entry-level GIS developer position at the DNR and got that. So I would say, yeah, it was definitely a challenge, kind of shifting gears from more of a support technician level role to a developer role. But it was something that I wanted to try out for a while. And I did it for a few years. Yeah. And then I went to the private sector for a while at Target. I was a developer there. It was a little bit more frustrating in that role because I was the only developer at that time at Target, GIS developer. Okay. And so I felt kind of like I didn't have anyone to help. I feel like in developing, you need to have a team to collaborate with and bounce ideas off of and learn from. And I didn't have that. So I got very frustrated and burnt out. And I decided to shift back to kind of an analyst role and back in the public sector. So from there, I worked at Carver County for a couple of years and Hennepin County for a year. And then am now in the role that I'm at the Corps of Engineers. I've been there for over 2 years now. So yeah.
With your background in coding and as a developer, how much time do you think, or maybe not how much time, but what role does that play in your current position? Are you doing a lot of programming and developing still?
I would say I'm doing maybe 20% programming in my current role. And it's more kind of, if I want to do programming, there's always an opportunity for it, but it's not a requirement of my current job. And I feel like that's kind of how it is at a lot of in the GIS analyst level roles that I've worked in. There's always a need for process automation and web development and stuff, but I think that's a skill that's hard to develop unless you are focusing on it 100% of the time. And a lot of GIS people don't have that time to spend investing in it. So I'm fortunate. I feel very fortunate to be able to still continue using my programming skills, but not have to do it 8 hours a day, every day.
Yeah, I bet. When I was doing my undergrad program, we didn't do any programming at all. It was, you learned how to do things in ArcMap, and that was pretty much where it stopped. My first full-time position out of college I was a GIS department of one. And so I really didn't have what you're talking about, where you need to have people to bounce those ideas off of and talk about with things. And I was also having trouble developing new skill sets because it was just me. And that first full-time position also didn't involve any programming. It was a, small municipality. So, I was spending a lot more time with, drawing the city limits 5 times a day instead of, writing code. That was part of why I went back to grad school. Was I needed more motivation than just the back of my head saying, this is something you should learn. So that was part of why I sought out the program that I did, was because it involved a lot more web development and programming. Shauna, has things changed much for the undergrads? Do they touch on programming in, a GIS 4-year program now?
So when I graduated from UMD, the program, I was the last graduating class where the GIS program was a BA, and they switched it to like a BS. And so when I was going to UMD, they had like a Python class, and but it wasn't a requirement. And then in some of our classes, we would do like one module on Python programming or model builder or something like that. But now the Python class is a requirement in their program at UMD.
Oh.
So I never took the Python programming class. I really regret not taking it. And now in like grad school, like for example, my next semester, it's all programming classes and computing classes. Our program at University of Utah is very heavy in programming and in Python. And I'd say a lot of the students that are heavy in GIS, their thesis or their dissertation a lot of it is in programming. So that's one thing that I've really been focused on in grad school, is to try and increase my understanding of that skill set.
Yeah, no, definitely. Oz, does that play a role for you at all? Having to write code or program things?
See, I get work sometimes that where I would be required to write a program. And like I discussed, that I have an engineering background and not a GIS background. I can do GIS, but I'm not skilled enough to write enough program from scratch. So sometimes when projects like that or tasks like that come to me, I mean, I could rather go to somebody in my, work, like a team member who is more advanced and expert in that. So when we work in a consulting firm, budget is the biggest constraint. I could spend like extra hours and try to figure out, but that's going to drain my budget. So it makes more sense to hand off that or delegate that to somebody who's an expert in that kind of work. So as an engineer or a planner, I would say, no, I don't need programming that much. But to those aspiring GIS people, if you were to work in an industry like mine, where I would hand off this work or delegate that to you, I would encourage everyone to take programming very seriously, because employers may not invest in you into learning a new program. They will train you with the software, but they're not gonna, teach you a new program. And you just need to know one program. It doesn't have, you don't have to be a master at it coming from school. If you know one, it's easy to learn another program. They're very similar. So take that encouragement and try to do, if you can, in your undergrad or master's.
I remember working at SEH, we had a wastewater engineer who wrote his, I don't know if it was a master thesis or what specifically was, but he wrote a Python for engineers. That was his whole paper that he did, and gave a really great presentation on it. I thought it was interesting because, as a GIS person, I get focused on kind of Esri side of things, right? So we're using the ArcPy library, we're using the, Python, ArcGIS API, trying to do the processing that way. And I remember looking at some of his code and I was like, I don't know what these libraries are. I don't know what they do. I can figure it out, but I was pretty impressed. I thought it was a neat, like you kind of said, I don't hear too many engineers talking about how they need to learn Python. And so I thought it was interesting to but see his take on it. One of the questions here we've got in the chat is becoming a GIS developer more or less the only way to advance a GIS career? I think this plugs perfectly. I keep sharing and unsharing the PowerPoint slide because I can't see the chat boxes as easily with the Q&A or the chat. So that's why I keep unsharing. But one of the next topics is advancement. What does it look like to advance in your career? Jacqueline, I'm probably going to come back to you for this one too. So you had that experience, becoming a developer, and then now, not completely phasing out of it, but I guess outside of programming and being a developer, how have you looked for ways to advance your career to where it is?
Yeah, I think just staying up to date on all of the latest technology is really key. And it's hard to find the time to continue learning all, everything that changes and advances in GIS. But yeah, just making sure that you are on top of the trends and new technologies that are happening, whether that's through your current job, if you have access to trainings and time to learn things, or if it's outside of your current job on your free time. In terms of programming, I don't think that's the only way that you can advance your career in GIS. I think there's specialties that you can focus on that are definitely in high demand, like database administration and even some of the new like configurable type application development. Yeah, I think there's all sorts of things that you can kind of specialize in terms of the technology and showcase that in interviews, and most of that will be well received. But
Yep.
Programming is definitely something that is kind of lacking, I think, in a lot of people's skill sets, unless you're recently coming out of school and you've learned it. People from my generation, I sound like I'm old, really old.
Don't do that.
Yeah, people that graduated like 10 years ago, we didn't learn programming in school at all. So it was really hard for us to try to teach ourselves on the job or on weekends or whatever. So yeah.
I went to grad school, and we spent a lot of time on web map development and writing our own mobile applications in Java, and then used my master's degree to get a new job. And I didn't touch programming for 3 years after I got that new job. It just wasn't part of that position. And I feel like that's pretty common. I think the things that help advance a career aren't exclusive to GIS. And Oz, you're not a GIS person. You dabble in it, obviously, but I think there's still a lot of commonality in how to advance a career. What does that look like from an engineer's side? Is a lot of it being motivated and doing good work, or are there specific things people should keep in mind as they're trying to advance their career?
In GIS, you mean, or?
Oh no, just in general. I mean, I think there's a lot of overlap, regardless of industry, on things that you can do to set yourself apart and move forward.
I think the diversity, and when I say diversity, you being ready for taking up on something that you're not a master in. You shouldn't just say no, that hey, I don't do this, so I'm not gonna do it. You should be upfront and be like, okay, let me give it a try. So that way, whoever is above you who makes that decision, whether you want to go up or not, they see you, okay, this person is very active and he or she wants to do this kind of work and is always jumping for something. So that really helps. So yeah, just having that motivation and, always be upfront with what you want to do. And, another thing I was going to add, I think a lot of people, I see some questions that are also coming to me personally. A lot of them asking about, what do we see in a GIS, like an entry level or these kind of positions. I just want to tell you guys something that, as a GIS, major, don't only think that you're going to get a GIS related job. You're not going to be it's not like you're going to end up being a GIS developer or GIS admin or something like that. There are also other opportunities that many don't know. For an example, in my team right now where I work, there are some planners that have GIS degree. They don't have a planning degree. They have GIS degree. And they have been working for 2-3 years. And now they're also planning to take an AICP exam, which is certified for planners. So don't know your industry. Don't just don't think or focus only that, okay, you're going to be this GIS. There are a lot of opportunities elsewhere. Surface transportation, aviation, environmental. Try to look for everything. There's GIS in almost all kind of science and artwork. So yeah.
I think that's a great point, because I think the skill sets that you build as a GIS professional overlaps with a lot of different projects that maybe aren't GIS related. You know, I got some exposure through GIS to our aviation department, and then that led to a conversation about you know, drones, because they were in need of drone pilots. And so they're sitting on the floor collecting dust, but I started looking at, what do I need to do to get my certification to become a drone pilot? You know, there is enough overlap with GIS that the skill set's going to help, and it would help advance that career without, you know, not because it excluded programming. Just coming back to the question of how do you advance a career without programming, I think it's really, like you said, taking up projects even if you're not 100% there, you know, and capable of it, because it gives you an opportunity to learn and add that to your skill sets. Shona, as you're looking at advancing your career, you know, obviously you're going to grad school right now, but you know, what do you think in 5 years from now, as you're looking to advance your career, what are some things that you're going to do coming out of grad school to find the right position and find advancement in those positions?
So just trying to think.
Yeah, that was a very interviewer question, wasn't it?
I think so. Like a major goal of going to grad school is like, it was a personal goal, is to get my master's degree. But another reason that I went back is to try and get that, like those programming skills and be more comfortable in a console environment. And I think once I've graduated, it's either going to be a path of continuing my education if I really do fall in love with research, or, I mean, for me to get like back into the job industry, or like the public or the private sector. I mean, I'm trying to keep contact with all of the networking I did before I went to grad school, like participating in the GIS LIS conference, and try to network with everyone's back in Minnesota and keep those ties with people, and yeah, try and use my programming skills to try and find a job. I mean, that's what I would really like to do, is apply those skills to a new job.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And then you also brought up the Minnesota GIS LIS consortium and networking. And so I'm going to use that as my segue to take us into topic 3, which very generally called it leadership, but it's more than that, right? It's those intangibles that aren't really education, not really professional experience, but the things that you can do to help find a job, help build a team, advance. I saw Megan in the chat had a great comment on, you know, what does advancement look like in GIS and how it's not just about programming. And I think leadership is a big part of that, because I would be willing to bet that 99.9% of leaders don't know anything about programming, right? There's ways to advance that career and take on new positions, not just in the GIS industry, but everywhere. Shona, you mentioned, you know, networking and participating in the consortium. I want to bring it back to the mentor-mentee program. So this is part of the professional development committee. I wanted to make sure to get a plug in for that. To anybody listening, I guess appropriate way would be, we had an underwhelming turnout for the mentor-mentee program. And so I want to make sure that I plug that and that people know that it's available. We'll have a link for that at the end. So on that topic of leadership and the Minnesota GIS LIS conference, Shona, you're presented this morning, and now you're part of this panel discussion. You're also our Young Professional Award winner. can you just talk a little bit about how the GIS consortium has contributed to your interest in GIS, what the community's like? I don't really have a great straightforward question for that. I just want to make sure that we talk about it and hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I could talk about that a little bit. So when I was going to UMD, it was one of my professors who suggested that we go to the GIS LIS conference. And honestly, before then, as a GIS student, I didn't know what the GIS LIS consortium was. And he was talking about this conference, and it was a great way to meet people and try to find a job. So I printed out all my resumes and I went to this conference and walked around the vendor hall and just started talking to people. And it was just a really great way to just like I had never done anything like that before. So it was just like a really good way to just like find out honestly what a conference was and like what a vendor hall was and all of that. And then the next year I was a little more in depth, I knew more about GIS. And I went to the conference again and I did the mentoree program with someone, and it was a great experience. I got to sit with my mentor, and we spent I think it was 45 minutes to an hour, and we just kind of discussed my goals, and she looked over my resume, and we just really connected on a lot of things. And then we stayed in communication and contact afterwards too. So it was just really helpful to have a one-on-one conversation with someone who's went through all the same experiences that I was about to go through. So that was really helpful. And then also there on the GIS LIS page on website, there's a page with all the different job openings, internship opportunities, which is really great if you're looking for an internship or a job.
John's doing a great job of plugging all the links into the chat, so want to make sure everybody sees that those are coming through the job boards there, the LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. The only way that this conference continues to grow and provide benefits for future young professionals, as well as some of the people that are advancing or well advanced into their career. Is that the right way to say that? Is if we it helps when we follow these things and when that level of engagement's there. My last two positions came from, even more than that, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, all but one of my positions has come from word of mouth. So whether it was a teacher, an instructor, a peer, somebody at the conference, or even a friend of a friend who was a recruiter, that's how I've found majority of my jobs. The only one that didn't go that way was the city of New Richmond, which was my first full-time job coming out of college, which was obviously unique. Shawna, it reminded me of something I hadn't thought of in a long time. You referenced your first conference, and then it reminded me that my first conference was senior year of college, and it was in St. Cloud, and only one of my friends had graduated and gotten a GIS job. And so his work was willing to pay for a hotel room. And then the rest of us were just broke college students. So we weren't going to get a hotel room. So we were at the St. Cloud GIS conference and piled 7 of us into his hotel room, sleeping on the floors. And it had a much more of a road trip, college vibe than it did a GIS conference. But I mean, what a great road trip, right? To the Minnesota GIS conference. Oz, you're, from being a professional engineer, what made you want to be involved with the Minnesota GIS LIS? And actually, maybe before you answer that, Molson, I saw you turn your camera on, and earlier you said it was a 60-minute panel. I thought we had 90 minutes. Are we running out of time, or are we good?
No, we are good. We're just fine. Yeah,
okay. No, good deal. Yeah. So Oz, what was your what attracted you to join the Minnesota GIS LIS consortium and participate with the conference?
Yeah, I'm an active member in LinkedIn. So I see somebody who joined or liked the MNGIS LIS consortium. And at that point I knew, hey, what is this? So I clicked on it and I saw what they stand for and what kind of work they do. So I became a member and saw it was free. I mean, come on, it's free. Why wouldn't I join, right? So got in there, went to a couple of conferences, and yeah, that was how I got in. But the great thing about it is I went to one of the workshops, and recently there was a project that we won from MnDOT. And the person who was reviewing that work was actually somebody I met at the workshop who was sitting next to me. So, it's a great marketing strategy. You would think like, what is it going to do? I'm just going to go there and, show my face and handshake with a couple of people. You never know. The person you're shaking that hand with might get you a $500,000 contract or $100,000 contract. So,
Wow.
there are always those opportunities. So marketing is very, very important. And you will learn that as you go up in your career.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the interviews that I received, in the last time I was looking for jobs, came from, somebody I met at the conference, added them on LinkedIn, and they posted a job posting, hey, our team's hiring. It wasn't a company that I would have sought out otherwise, and it didn't pop up on any of the job postings. When I was searching, GIS on Indeed or any of the job boards, such as the Minnesota GIS LIS job board, which is linked in the chat. I guess building off of that, finding jobs and networking and the importance of that for building your career. Jacqueline, have you sat on the other side of that table as the interviewer, where you're now looking at adding people to your team?
Yeah, I've been on quite a few career or interview panels, and there's definitely so many qualified, great candidates out there. So I think the more connections you can make, the better. It's always helpful. I don't know if it's okay to say this, but it's helpful to know the person that you're interviewing a little bit too. Like, oh, I've seen you before at the GIS LAS, or I saw you present, or I saw you in that workshop. But even that aside, I think a standout interviewee usually has something that goes above and beyond just experience and education, like some volunteer work with a community mapping organization, or some extracurricular thing or special project that they did that sets them apart from some of the other interviewers. But yeah, it's a good market out there. There's a lot of good jobs right now. There's also a lot of really great people coming out of school with new skills and things that are going to be good for the GIS community.
Yeah, and one of the things you touched on there was, having something outside of school. And I guess I wanted to expand that, right? Because it's not just, are you volunteering? Are you doing GIS projects in your spare time? Because how many people, well, this is the wrong group to say that to, but how many people are doing GIS projects in their spare time? I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of raised hands here pretty quick from our audience, but I want to expand on that, because I think there are, participating in the conference is something you can do, presenting at conferences, whether it's, Minnesota GIS LIS, the Wisconsin WLIA is another one, but also those things that you do in your spare time. I played rugby, and I was on the board of directors because it was a nonprofit group. You would be amazed at the diversity in background, and specifically professional background, of the people you're going to interact with from those standpoints. I think it's important to do things. I guess is a really lame point, but it does matter. Because if you're getting out there and you're participating, you're interacting with people, you never know who you're going to meet or where that common bond is going to be with people. I guess this didn't come up in our conversation, Oz, but have you sat on the interviewer side of the table? And what's something that interviewees have done to stand out in those interview processes?
Sure. First thing, the interviewers are all different. Nobody is going to think alike. So everybody have their own perspective of what they're looking for. But when in general, if we are inviting, or if we are selecting a candidate for an interview, looking at their resume, that means we know you know the work. You can do this work. That's why we are calling 10 people for the interview. But at the interview, what we want to see is your communication skill. Are you going to get along with our team? Are you going to get along with our partners? These are very important. Like I said, your resume, you have that degree, you have that experience, all good. We know you're really good at that. But how do you communicate? How do you market yourself? You have 30 minutes to boast about yourself, show us your talent, show us your work. That's more important. You can win the interviewer's heart that way. Always try to leave a good impression in the end, because even if that interviewer isn't going to hire you today, chances are that they might come back to you in a future year. So, keep that lasting impression.
I started smirking as you were saying that because I've been in my new position for almost 4 months now, and for better or worse, I had my boss tell me that I was not the most qualified person that they interviewed. He let me know that on paper I was probably last place, but the interview process went really well, and got along, and they exactly what you spoke to. Having the background says, either I know how to do it or I have the capability to learn how to do it. It's how you mesh with that team and, those personal relationships. What would that look like? Because I think we can all appreciate that just because somebody can do the job doesn't mean you want them to do the job. It really helps when you can get along with people. Shona, one thing that I saw on your LinkedIn page that we didn't talk about was SAG Award. And that's certainly something that sets people apart on their resume. I'm actually just curious on my own. What did that look like? What maybe even for the people that don't know what that is, maybe tell us what the SAG Award is and talk about how you and your team won that.
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. So for those who don't know what a SAG award is, it stands for Special Achievement in GIS, and it's a annual award that Esri gives out. I think they give out 100 of them, or I think it's about 100 awards a year. And they usually present these at the user conference every year. So yeah, myself and my previous position at Carleton County as the GIS specialist, and then Jared Hovey, the GIS coordinator for Carleton County, we worked on a project with Carleton County Public Health. Primarily, there was emergency management, the land department. It was a huge collaborative effort to do some drive-through vaccine clinics. And through these drive-through vaccine clinics, they were going to use paper forms and clipboards and pens, and then just sanitize the tools between uses. So Jared and I took this information and we came up with an idea to try and use Survey 123 and ArcGIS dashboards instead, and then completely just eliminate paper forms. And it was really successful, and we were able to do it. And it was kind of cool because we took the spatial component out of GIS for this, and it was all just record keeping, and it was just really cool to be able to do that. And it was really successful. We administered over 6,000 vaccines using this process that we came up with, and over about 5 months. And yeah, it was awesome. It was really cool, and we helped our public health staff, and yeah, it was really fun.
That's a super cool project. I think it's been really interesting to see how COVID has really shined a light on GIS, from the Johns Hopkins dashboard to what you're talking about using Survey 123 instead of a pen and paper. That's a fantastic project. That's super cool.
Yeah, and it was really cool to be able to support our public health staff. I mean, the year that they've had and what they still have to overcome. I mean, for us to be able to help them in some way, it was just, awesome.
No, very cool. Looks like we have a question just came in. How do we get the open jobs out to available applicants better? Megan, or maybe you can answer in the chat or vocally if you feel like unmuting. How do people get the job postings on that board, or do they email folks? And have you found anything that's helpful?
Yeah. So if you follow the link that I sent above, there is a link for you. Let's see. I thought there was a form. Yeah, so there is a form. There's a submit an opening link on the networking/professional development page through GIS LAS, and you just fill out the fields, and that is your first step to go ahead and get your job on the job board. I think that, especially if you're trying to reach out to those applicants that are not as familiar with GIS LAS, advertising on LinkedIn would be a great way.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Megan. We've had Megan as a shadow panelist. She's been much more active in the professional development committee for a while now than I have. I'm a new guy. I just joined the professional development committee back in July, and this is kind of my first real role with the committee. So I think it's been great. I think John or somebody else mentioned it in the chat, but I think being on these committees is great. It helps you network, puts you in positions that maybe you wouldn't otherwise be. We were talking about advancement earlier, right? Getting those new experiences. Odds of me being a moderator for a panel discussion at, Optum are not real likely. So it's good to build these skill sets and try to remember what it's like to do public speaking now that everything's online. We've been talking about things in a very positive light. Sean, I'm gonna come back to you, but when you're looking at job postings or as you're going to be applying after your master's program, what are red flags from a job posting? That's kind of what I'm trying to get to here. So they asked about how do we get those postings out there? LinkedIn, the job boards are great, but what would be attractive in a job posting for you to apply to it versus just keep scrolling past it?
Oh, that's a hard question. I think it really depends on I guess what situation you are in. If you need a job and you just want to get in the work, the field, and you just want to start building that experience, I guess my advice would just be to apply for every job that you can that you're interested in, because any interview, in my opinion, interviews aren't fun, I guess. Maybe some people like interviews, but I sure don't. And I guess every interview you do is just good practice, even if you feel like it didn't go well. So I feel like if you really just want to start building your experience, I feel like apply for every job that you see. I mean, I would obviously read the description of the job and see that there's some interest in it and that you feel confident that you could do that job and fill those needs. But I feel like when you're just starting off, when I was graduating from UMD, I graduated in May, I started applying for jobs in February, March, and I just applied. I feel like I don't really know if I would say there's red flags, I guess, to a job. I mean, I feel like you get that kind of red flag if you get an interview and you go and you meet the people that you're going to be working with. I feel like that's maybe where I would find some red flags, and that has happened to me in the past. But I feel like it's hard to know on paper, I guess.
Yeah. Oz, I saw you nodding a lot while Shona was talking about applying to every job. Did you want to dovetail off of that at all, or anything to add?
Yeah, don't just look for a particular job, just keep applying to every position. I mean, there's no guarantee that you think that this is a dream job, like a first entry-level job, and they're going to call you for an interview. It's if you get it, really good. If not, that shouldn't disappoint you. Just keep applying everywhere. And you don't know if you get hired, if you're going to like it or not, unless you try. So keep doing it. And I see there's a question about if somebody is not very social and how they can improve their interview skills or what should they do. I can tell you from my personal experience, I have had at least over 50, if not 100 interviews. And I was not good at, interview skills. Not at all, zero. I would say minus, negative. But as I started, doing these, at one point, I knew exactly what the interviewer was going to request from me. So when right now, or, from last 5 years or so, when I go to an interview, I smile. Once the interviewer opens his mouth, what's your, tell me something about yourself. I'm like, okay, there you go. I got 2 minutes and I'm gonna crack this. So that's where that's what you do. You know the questions that are gonna come to you. Just keep saying, this is what I do. And that question, that first question, tell me something about yourself. This is a very common question. You're gonna get that. If you crack that, talking about yourself and how you got into this and what you want to do, trust me that you have better opportunities than the candidates that are going to come after that. So that's the key.
Jacqueline, anything you want to add on what, I guess specifically for the interview part of things, if you're not comfortable in interviews, what's something you can do to help set yourself apart in that hiring process?
I would say build out like an online web portfolio that you can share with the people that you're going to be interviewing with, so that they can take a look at your work beforehand and get an idea of what it is. Also communicate with them. I personally wouldn't mind it if someone who had social anxiety attached a cover letter with their resume and said, hey, I've got social anxiety. I'm not a great interviewer, but I have great skills. I can work, this is where I've worked. And here's my mentor or my supervisor or someone that can vet for you and your skills, and that you would be a great worker. I think that would be a good way to kind of approach the interview process if you're not good at it. But I do agree that getting a lot of practice interviewing is key as well.
Yeah, I'm great points. I'm glad you made the point about the online portfolio. I was scrolling through the attendee list because I don't think there's anybody on there that's going to know who I'm talking about, but didn't want to call them out. But there was a person that I interviewed for a position, 8 years ago now, and they clearly were not comfortable in the interview, and it was really tough to get answers that were more than 2 words out of them. Left that interview, probably not going to hire this person. But they followed up with a thank you email, saying, hey, really appreciate your time. Here's a link to my online portfolio. And that level of accessibility, right? Because if somebody has it printed on their resume, I'm less likely to type that into my web browser and look it up. But since they did a follow-up email and it was really easy, I clicked the link and their online portfolios there, they made some of the best maps I have ever seen. And this was as an undergrad, they were a junior at the time. This was for an internship. I was blown away. And they went from, being on my, we weren't going to call them back list to, we need to hire this person because I don't care if they don't interview well. That portfolio is amazing. So I really want to emphasize that, because I know while interviewing people, maybe things have changed now and people have wisened up to how they need to have a portfolio. But when I was interviewing for interns, GIS interns over the years, majority of them didn't bring a portfolio. In fact, the 3rd year that I was interviewing people, I only had one person bring a portfolio in. And they brought a tablet. It was interactive. They're highlighting the web apps that they made on ArcGIS Online. It really, that was an easy hire. That was a no-brainer at that point. But yeah. So coming back to the original question about social anxiety, like Oz said, practice those answers. Have some of your canned responses. They're going to ask you about yourself. Like Jacqueline said, practice helps. It's cheesy, but do it in a mirror. You know, it's if you're uncomfortable talking to a mirror, it's not going to be much better when you're talking to somebody you don't know. So get those reps, build that, you know, that muscle memory for your interviews, and then big emphasis on online portfolios. And John just sent a link for a great example of an online portfolio into the chat. Looks like we only have 10 minutes left here. So I'm going to jump back to the PowerPoint for a second. You know, wanted to have a formal Q&A session here at the end. I think the audience was really great in asking those questions in the chat as we've been, you know, talking here. So really want to thank everybody who submitted questions. If you still have questions, now's the time. We got 10 minutes left, so I wanted to leave some time for that formal Q&A session. And then a couple notes here too. I really want to emphasize, join the mentorship program. Even if you're a you know, recent graduate, or, you know, maybe a couple years into your career, the mentorship program, both from a mentor or mentee side of things, can be really helpful. It can set you up to have that one-on-one interaction that Shona talked about that, you know, can be tough at a conference. Never mind a virtual conference setting. When you're in person and there's, you know, 400 people like one of the Duluth conferences, it can be tough to get one-on-one time talking with somebody new. So I want to encourage everybody to sign up for that mentorship program. The surveys to sign up for it, we use Survey 123. It's closed right now, but we may open it up again soon, and trying to have maybe even figure out a way to do open enrollment essentially. Be sure to check out the Minnesota GIS LIS networking site. There's a lot of great resources there for the Professional Development Committee. And then I only have the contact information here for the Professional Development Committee. Feel free to send any emails to that. If you want to get in touch with any of our panelists today, you know, feel free to send that email. If you want, send an email to the Professional Development Committee if you want to. Otherwise, you know, obviously LinkedIn has been a topic today. I'm sure you can look people up on there. I'm not seeing any questions coming in. We've got 8 minutes left, so maybe go through and have kind of parting advice. Start with Jacqueline. Do you have any parting advice that you want to give to either current students or recent graduates as they're looking to start their GIS career?
Yeah, I guess I would say, I would reiterate everything you just said about networking and joining up with the GIS LIS membership. Those are great. I know when I was an undergraduate and in grad school, there was opportunities to attend a lot of conferences at a student rate. I think I met a ton of people through conferences when I was in school that I still stay in contact with and know and have worked with in various jobs. So it's a really great way. The Minnesota GIS community seems really large, but really when you get into the career field, you run into everybody, you know everybody. So it's good to build those connections. I would also say just you're probably not thinking about continuing education or continuing learning right now. You just want to know how to get a job. But when you do get into that first job or into your career path, just make sure that you continue developing your skills and always learning. Because I've worked with plenty of people who just kind of feel like, now I got my job and I'm going to sit here and just do the same thing for 10 years. But I think in order to succeed and grow and develop in the field, you need to continuously be learning. And so find jobs that offer a healthy training budget so that you can go to conferences, you can take online trainings, you can network with people, and then keep building your skill sets. And you'll probably find what really interests you in GIS or whatever field you end up being in, what you kind of want to focus in on and develop your skills in. And that's always good.
Awesome. And yeah, you're right. It is a small community. The more people that I meet, the more I realize I've been seeing your name for years. It's finally putting that face with the name. Sean, as a grad student and our Young Professional Award winner, any parting advice you have for current students or people thinking about grad school?
Yeah, I guess like people thinking about grad school is like, there's so much funding available through grad graduate programs that before, like sometimes maybe like the price of going to grad school could be a limitation to some people and not being able to afford it. And like, there's so many funding opportunities and like there's so many pots of money out there for other people to pay for you to go to school and these universities to provide assistance for you to go to school. So like, don't think of that as a limitation, and reach out to professors at universities and ask them if there's funding available, because the chances are that there probably is funding, and there's some way for you to go to grad school even if you think if the financial piece of it is a limitation. And I guess people who are graduating and trying to get into the job field, like I said before, apply, just constantly being applying to jobs and practice public speaking. I used to be very nervous speaking in front of people, and I just like push myself to do it. And I think in the end of the day, it really helps with like interviews as well. And I had another point. I was going to say something. I can't remember what it was now. So
Well, if you think of it in the next 5 minutes, give us a hand wave. I really liked your point there about the financial aspect. My master's program, if I had done it full time, I would have finished in 2 years. And instead I did it part-time over 3 years, one to have some level of sanity while working full time, but then also my job reimbursed up to $5,000 annually. They didn't care about the program or how long the program was taking. They cared about the tuition reimbursement aspect of it, and $5,000 was the cap because of taxes. And so by doing my 2-year program in 3 years, as opposed to the 2, I was able to retain a little bit of sanity going part-time. And I was also able to get an extra $5,000 from my employer at the time that went towards my master's program, which is great. Oz, final words. Do you have any parting advice for people, either as an engineer or from your GIS experience, or kind of the middle ground between the two?
Yeah, like I discussed earlier, there are a lot of opportunities. You just have to be open and you have to, look for it. There will be opportunities. And for, the students and the aspiring entry levelers, I would encourage you to join this mentorship program. It's free. All you have to do is just maybe spend like half an hour with that individual and, try to understand, what the market requires and, how you can be helpful. And, many of you are going to school right now, and you're probably having your professors review your, resume, or maybe a career development looking at your resume. It's good that you're doing that, but trust me, those who work in the private sector, or, those who work in the workforce, they have a better understanding of how those resumes should look like. So if you're in this program and you reach out to one of us, we might be able to help you with, what the current market, like, what kind of resumes that you should throw out. A professor might think of it more from an academia perspective, whereas we in the private sector, we don't look at that. Having some research is good, but how you write them, it has to be one pager. You don't have to give me like a 20-page resume. Trust me, people don't have time in the workforce to go through that. Some do, some don't. So, there are a lot of opportunities like that. So join the group and, you will benefit from it.
I actually wish we had more time. Now that you started talking about resumes, I thought of all the points about, do you do a pretty well-designed resume? Do you get straight to the point with just the black and white, line by line? I feel like we could have a much longer conversation here. Yeah, I wanna thank all the panelists. This is a volunteer gig, so I very much appreciate your time and your involvement with the panel and also the GIS consortium. So hopefully we can have an in-person conference next year, and I can buy all of you whatever drink you want. Molson, do we have any final items before we sign off?
I think we're good. Thank you. I just wanted to thank all the panelists and all the participants. This was actually very, very informative, very useful webinar. I hope that everyone has taken advantage out of it, and there were a lot of takeaways. Especially, I was also a PhD. I am a PhD student, so I also took a lot of advantage out of all the conversation and the discussions in here. Very helpful. Thank you all the panelists and all the audience. And just wanted to make this note that we have recorded this video, we have recorded this session, and we will process the videos and make them available to you shortly afterward. And other than that, I think we're wrapping it up, right? So enjoy the rest of the conference and have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thanks so much, everybody. It was great
Bye.
chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.